Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our class this afternoon talking about R2TMRIOS and certification. You'll also get to hear some great experiences on recycling today and what people have done in regards to that. So for the day, I'm going to go through, I want to show you guys a little bit about the ISRI website and how you can become a branded certified electronics recycler. And then Corey is going to go through the R2 standard and Paula with the RIO standard. And then we've got Bob McCarthy from Green Eye who's going to talk to you about preparing for certification and what your next steps are. And then Bardia from Perry Johnson is going to tell you how to get certified. And then finally at the end we'll wrap up with some experiences from Dell and PCRR, Regency, and we'll have a question and answer panel. John is circulating a sign-up sheet now, just to sign off of who was in here today. If you can just send that around and do that, I'd appreciate it. And also, you should have been given a survey. If you can complete that and leave it at the end of the session today in the back, we'd like to know your thoughts and how we can get better at doing this. So now I want to show you really quickly the Certify Me website for RIOS and R2. So if you haven't been to this website yet, you can get on here by going onto the ISRI homepage, going to Programs and Services, and then R2 RIOS. And this Certify Me website goes through a bunch of different things. So is anyone certified to RIOS at this point in this room? We have one, two. A few more in the back. Okay, great. Well, if you're not certified and you want to look at it more, the website is actually going to let you go and click on Why Get Certified. And when you scroll down, it's going to give you some more definitive information on financial benefits and quality, safety, etc. So feel free to go through and spend some time and look at this. And if you came in this morning and got the Certify Me recycling packet, then you've got some of that information already in there. In addition to that, you can look at if you're a scrap recycler or if you're an electronics recycler, more of what it does for you and what's available. So that is all here as well that you can go ahead and click on. Say I want to send my material to a certified facility. I can click on here, find a certified facility, and I can go through and search for whatever region fits my operations and what I'm looking for. And you can always, spend some time here. There's a map of the certified facilities. It's also going to tell you why you would want to use a certified facility. And realize that a lot of this information on the Certify Me website is going to give you additional marketing advantage when you're working with your clients or new clients for that matter. Another really great tool with the Certify Me website is looking at the success stories. And these are other industry professionals, people that have gotten certified and been doing this for a while, and you can scroll through and read their stories about how it benefited them. And maybe you'll end up going through the process and having some similar things happen. There is also a little spot here as well for resources. And when you go ahead and you click on resources, it's going to go through everything you're going to need, from new membership forms to if you're a certification body, general marketing materials, etc. There's also a video here on the website that Julius, I think, is going to talk about later with Regency and really look at what they do and how that works under the certification and what it's done for them. So one of the things you guys want to think about is to get RIO certified. It does cost a little bit of money. But by joining and paying that little fee, you really get a lot out of it. So if you go ahead and you want more information, you can get on the website and put your name and company and everything in, and they'll start to send you some stuff. But once you join, you really get all the benefits that ISRI has that supports us in everything we do. From a whole manual with all the procedures and templates and things that you're going to need, as well as industry support and your peers as well as things like this. It helps us fund these sessions and train you and teach you more about what's going on in the industry. So, any questions about the website? All right, well, great. We're going to go ahead and get started for today. Give me 1 second, little error. So we're going to go ahead and get started today. Corey Demi is going to be our first presenter with AERC. Corey is the Vice President of Operations and Compliance for AERC. He has more than 15 years experience in the IT industry, including 7 years in recycling and IT asset disposition. Over the past 2 years, Mr. Demi has worked as an assistant to the Executive Director of R2 Solutions. In this capacity, he answered technical and policy questions about the standard with recyclers, the public, and he worked with those certification bodies to improve the quality of certification audits. Mr. Demi is engaged in the Technical Advisory Committee to write and publish the R2 guidance and the R2 2013 standards. So please welcome Corey.
Thank you, Tracy. Good afternoon, everyone. It's after lunch. Hope we can keep you awake with a lot of good information here. So today I'm going to talk about the R2 2013 standard. It's been in process for over a year now, almost a year and a half now that we've been working on revising the standard and putting out a new edition. A lot of people have put a lot of volunteer time into making this happen from a lot of different stakeholder groups. So the standard that you see today, you may question or not agree with some of the changes that were made in here, but I can tell you it's been through a long process with a lot of input and a lot of debate to get where we are today. We did have a public comment period last fall, which was open to everyone to provide feedback. We did get about I think it was about 75 comments. So, we've taken all that and made some final changes. Right now, the standard is not final yet. It is with the Board of Directors of R2 Solutions right now who have the final say to adopt the standard. And once that happens, then we'll be able to move forward with implementation. So how many people in this room have certified facilities to R2? Good. So about 20, I'd say. So for you, this will be a kind of an update for everyone else. We're going to look forward. No sense in looking back at this point to the current standard. We're going to look at what the new standard looks like so that you have all that information. So I did mark an asterisk in each of these slides where there is a new requirement different from 2008. And we'll go through that. I just wanted to pull it out for you. The material that you have in front of you, I included a lot of detail. I don't expect to be able to go into that much detail in the time we have today, but I wanted to make sure it was in there for you to review and to look at. So starting right into it, the first provision of R2 requires that you have an EH&S management system. And moving forward with the new standard, it requires that EH&S management system to be certified. And I know the TAC realizes that this creates a little bit more cost for everyone in implementing the standard, but the alternatives were also considered, and we felt that the incorporation of other standards that are already existing, that other companies are already certified to, that you may already be certified to, really just allows us to leverage what is accepted in the world today. So with that, you can have ISO 14001 for the environmental piece, but you also need the health and safety piece. So if you have ISO 14001 certification, you also need to have OSAS 18001 certification for health and safety. So the combination of those two would fulfill this requirement. Or conversely, RIOS fills the requirement in one certification. So it's kind of the advantage of pursuing the RIOS route is that you can do it all in one integrated solution. And on top of that, you get the quality aspect too from the things that you would see in ISO 9001. So Provision 1 does require a certified environmental health and safety management system moving forward. Provision 2 remains unchanged. We still have the hierarchy of reuse, recycle, and dispose. So the premise is, the strategy is, we always want you to look for opportunities to reuse equipment wherever possible, wherever there's it's viable to do so. It's not that old, and it's still in good condition and still works. So with the proper measures of testing and refurbishment, you should be able to maximize reuse. And then, of course, recycle, recovering the materials, breaking down each electronic into its components. And theoretically, there shouldn't be disposal. Theoretically, we should be able to reuse and recycle 99.9% of what we touch in this industry. Provision 3, legal compliance. So first of all, it is absolutely the expectation that any R2 certified facility is legally compliant to all applicable environmental health and safety regulations. So the standard is written broadly to require legal compliance. It doesn't tell you exactly which laws apply to you. But some of the things within legal compliance include knowing what your legal requirements are, documenting them, having a plan to update them, keep them current. And one thing that was clearly decided in this process was you do have to have a compliance audit. So that's specific. That's different from your internal audit to the standard. It's a compliance audit. It's verifying that you are meeting your OSHA regulations or RECRA or all the things that apply to your operation. So compliance is different than conformance, and I just want to make sure everyone understands that. When we talk about exporting, there is specifically a requirement in the new standard that as the R2 certified company, you alone are responsible for ensuring that exports are legally compliant. If you're using an R2 certified downstream for your circuit boards, for example, that's not a pass. The TAC was very clear that the certified company, the company that's being audited by Perry Johnson or Orion or whoever the CB might be, is responsible for demonstrating legal compliance of all exports by you or by the downstream vendors you're using. So if you're sending your circuit boards to another vendor who is then exporting them to Europe for smelting, you are going to need to have that evidence that that's a legal transaction wherever it's going. So I just want to make that clear. Just because you're using an R2 certified downstream doesn't absolve you of the requirement to have that. The other thing that was changed in the new standard is legal compliance for any exports are going to apply to both OECD and non-OECD countries. So in the current 2008 standard, it only applies to non-OECD countries. Does anyone know what I mean by OECD and non-OECD? Is that a term that's familiar? Basically, we're separating the world. Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, I think it's what it stands for. OECD countries are developed nations, and non-OECD are primarily undeveloped nations. China is a non-OECD country. Australia is an OECD country. Most of Europe is OECD. So we're taking out that variable in the equation, and so now any exporting you do or your downstreams do, you're responsible for demonstrating that it's legal and having that evidence of such. Not necessarily for each and every shipment unless it's required, but the laws that allow it to happen. And also it includes any countries that it passes through. So keep in mind if you tell me you're going to China with your circuit boards, but they're passing through Hong Kong, you know, it's a gray area, but look, every country that it goes through, you have to demonstrate the compliance that is legal to do so. And it must be understandable to the auditor and to you. So if you can't read Spanish, then you need to get an English version. So is that clear to everyone, the legal compliance? Does anyone have any questions about that? Yes, sir.
When does your liability drop off? Once you sell it to the next person, and they sell it to the next person, so on and so forth.
Well, let me clarify. So what we're talking about is things that what we call focus materials. And we haven't gotten to that section yet, but your focus materials are circuit boards, batteries, CRT glass, anything containing mercury, and PCBs, polychlorinated biphenyls. So any device component or just raw materials that fall into that classification are the things that you have to track or you have to comply with the export requirements. So if you're moving plastic as a commodity or you're moving metals as a commodity, you know, those do not fall into this category because they're not focused materials. So we're just talking about those things that require further refinement. And thank you for the question because I didn't make that clear.
I was wondering too, like how far do you have to take it? In other words, I send it to Joe, and Joe might be sending it to Sue, Pam, and Dick. So do I have to check Sue, Pam, and Dick too?
You need to know where it goes. Yep. So that's the difference. That's what R2 certification is all about, is controlling those focus materials until they're no longer a focus material. So if you, for example, here's a distinction. If I have circuit boards and I send them to a secondary smelter in the US, and they break it down and they ball mill it and it's now a precious metal, that's no longer a focus material, it's not a circuit board, right? But if I send the circuit boards to Europe, it's still a focus material when I export it. So now I have to follow provision 3 and demonstrate the legal compliance of that. Make sense? In the back.
I'm still unclear on if you choose an R2 organization to ship your focus materials to initially, aren't they doing their due diligence, or you have to still make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to? Is that
Well,
how we have to track it?
so theoretically, they should have all this information, right?
Right.
So theoretically, it should make your job easier by using an R2 certified downstream, right? But yes, it was debated for a long time, and the TAC had agreed that as the company going through certification, you still need to be able to demonstrate that. Any other questions before I move on? All right, so provision 4. So this is really the crux of building an environmental health and safety management system. Number 1, you have to identify your hazards. And I've seen a lot of different people take a lot of different twists on this, and really what it's saying is, you need to create your footprint, as we call it in the RIOS terminology, or your aspects evaluation. Really, it's saying, here's all the things that I do, and here are all my environmental risks. And I'm doing an analysis and figuring out where I have exposure and where I need to implement controls. So just by going through that one exercise, that's going to tell you pretty much everything that you need to document or train or further control in your management system. So this is one critical area, and I'm sure Paula will touch on it. But this is kind of your starting point. Once you do this, that's going to lay out what else you need to do to build that environmental health and safety management system. So very important to do that exercise. And it's a difficult exercise to do the first time through, and you may need help. And, you know, as Paula will talk about in RIOS, you know, there's help in the implementation guide to help you through that process. I never did it before. I'm not an environmental health and safety expert. I don't have a degree or training in that area. And I, you know, with the RIOS implementation guide years ago, I taught myself. You know, I did it. So I think you can do it too. But this is a very important piece to start with. The other, yes?
Is it safe to say that someone's got the R2 2008 version in place, if they want to upgrade to the 2013 standard, or do you have to go back and put in either a RIOS piece or an ISO piece?
Yes. And theoretically, even though it wasn't certified the first time as an environmental health and safety management system, if you've implemented it according to these other standards, then you really should have all the pieces you need to get certified. The workload shouldn't be too much. But the problem was, you know, before provision 1 was kind of a little too wide open, so there wasn't enough structure, especially for the auditors going in, to say, yes, it does meet the requirements, or no, it doesn't. It just said you had to have an environmental health and safety management system.
It sounds like that's going to take place from your perspective. When they do agree on the 2013 standard, that's going to...
Yes.
Okay, so we're forward-looking for sure. We want to go down the road, it makes sense to do both.
Yeah, you know, I mean, at this point, I'm 99% confident, you know. What? No, the board hasn't approved it yet. The TAC has approved it and passed it on to the board. They have final adoption. So the board could change it. You know, I can't speak for the board and what they're going to do. The other parts of the requirements here, having an emergency action plan, which you probably already have, you know, what to do in case of a fire, what to do in case of a tornado, what to do in a security event. Good housekeeping is specifically in there because good housekeeping breeds good operations. So, you know, ensuring that your facility is well kept and your employees take pride in that is actually part of the standard. You do need to designate a person with the responsibility for health and safety specifically. And you do need to make sure that all of your employees receive the same care, protective equipment, training, so on and so forth. So whether you're using hired employees, temps, contractors, you know, you do need to incorporate all those into your health and safety program. Yes, sir.
Yeah, you do have, you are using, say, contract service for your labor out in your yard and things like that. Does that kind of hurt you in trying to be certified with this? Is it worth more if all of your employees are actually under the company umbrella as opposed to going through an agency?
I don't think so. You know, for the standard purposes of the standard, it doesn't make a distinction. You know, they're a worker. You know, no matter who pays their salary. Just to clarify, you know, if you're bringing in temporary labor to help on a specific task, or, you know, let's say you're doing a collection event and you bring in additional labor for that, I don't think the expectation is that you have, you know, you give them 50 hours of training up front. You're gonna provide them the appropriate training for what you need to do, and, you know, provided that they're supervised. You know, you're not tasking them to do something on their own and you're walking away. Sure. So the next two provisions really get into the rub of the standard. Provision 5, focus materials. We talked about the 5 focus materials. The provision does require you to have a focus material management plan. So how are you specifically managing these focus materials coming through your facility? You know, what's required of batteries, of CRT glass? You know, how are you managing that? And then how is that managed downstream? I have seen a lot of people implement, you know, their list of downstream vendors as their focus materials management plan. That's really not the intent of it. It might be part of that, but you need to consider both, how you're handling it internally through your processes and further downstream till it's no longer a focus material. Some specific things, mercury items have to go to be retorted. Circuit boards was changed a little bit to be a little bit more flexible. So remove batteries and mercury relays and recover precious metals. So that may be done at your facility, in your process. It may be partially done in your process, or it may be a downstream vendor who's doing that for you. The standard doesn't make a distinction as to where it's being done. It just, you have to control that and manage that so that those materials are properly managed. And very specifically, there is no landfill of focus materials. So you can't take batteries and put them into the landfill. You may be able to do it legally under the law, but when you are going for a certification, you're voluntarily signing up for these requirements. So you may be able to do it legally, but this takes it a step further. So people would ask me about CRT glass, for example, and landfilling. It's not allowed under the standard. So remember, plastics and metals are not a focus material, right? They don't fall into the category of the 5. So theoretically, you could landfill metal if you really wanted to. But as long as it's a focus material, it can't be landfilled. So let's talk about the downstream vendors, right? Because this question?
Yeah, one question. If there's a focus material that doesn't have a recycling solution for it to date, how would you manage that with the case? Like in the case of a lithium iron phosphate battery that's got like a bulletproof casing on it that nobody has a recycling solution for, and currently people are using like a certified hazardous waste landfill for those. How do you deal with that conundrum?
First of all, you would have to demonstrate that you've done the research and there is absolutely no recycling option for that. So the burden is on you to be able to demonstrate that. Yep. So the downstream due diligence. So this has been tightened up since the 2008 version. Number one, whoever you're sending materials to has to conform to your FM management plan, that plan that we talked about in the last slide. So you have to evaluate your downstream vendors. Are their processes in line with your management plan? You can decide what your management plan is for those materials, but now you need to evaluate the downstreams. It should be logical. It should be logical that you're picking vendors who are doing what you say you're doing. It does require that your downstreams have an EH&S management system. And to clarify what that requirement is, we've linked it to provision 3 and 4 for legal compliance, managing your legal requirements, and also the on-site health and safety. So when you're evaluating your downstream to see whether they qualify as having an EH&S management system, all you got to do is look back to provision 3 and 4 as your criteria. Verifying that they're legally compliant. The current standard says that that they have to have all their permits, basically. So this challenges that a little bit and goes a little bit further and says, you need to check that they are legally compliant, much like you should be doing already for Superfund liability, CERCLA, SRIA reporting. Going out to, in the United States, going out to the ECHO website and checking whether they've had any violations, health and safety violations. You're looking to see that they're a well-operated company and they're in legal compliance for the most part. Everyone's going to have a compliance issue from time to time. It's how we manage those issues and resolve them and move forward that we're looking for. You do have to audit your downstream vendors. Notice that it says audit, it doesn't say on-site audit. So, it's not expected that every downstream you use is going to require an on-site audit, but you have to develop that criteria. Where do you need to go out and physically do the on-site audit? If you're sending plastics, for example, they're not a focus material, they really wouldn't fall into this, you really wouldn't do an on-site visit. So each of you should have your program developed to specify that. When am I going to go on site? When can I accept a desktop review? When am I going to hire a third party to go and do the audits for us? There's some great things going on in the industry as far as leveraging that, and it takes a lot of time and resources if you have a lot of vendors. So Bob's going to talk a little bit about that later, but there's some opportunities there to streamline that. Follow the reuse provision if the downstream is refurbishing. And the next one I want to make a little clear, provision 7, throughput. So you have to know where the focus materials are going until it's no longer a focus material. So I use the example of the circuit boards. If they're going to a secondary smelter, and that smelter is turning those circuit boards into a block of precious metals, it's no longer a focus material after that. It doesn't meet the definition of a circuit board. So that's where your process can stop. And one thing was added, we incorporated into the downstream requirements, physical security. So all the requirements of provision 10 have to be met by your downstream vendors. So let's talk about when you're using a certified downstream. So, we would love to just say, okay, if you use an R2 certified, you're done. But in this process, we all need to hold each other accountable as well and provide oversight to each other. So there's a couple of things. Using an R2 certified downstream should definitely make the process easier, and that's the goal of it. But it doesn't absolve you of doing any due diligence. As an R2 certified company, you are responsible for making sure that the materials you send downstream are managed until they're no longer a focus material. So, so the first thing that you need to do with a R2 certified downstream is, again, take your focus materials management plan, verify that that downstream is congruent with your plan. The things they're doing line up with your focus material management plan. So the things that you tell your customer you're doing actually occur down through the chain. And secondly, document the flow of focus materials. That doesn't mean that you have to go and audit all the downstreams of your R2 certified downstream. What it means is there needs to be transparency of those focus materials. And I emphasize focus materials. We'll get to this in a couple slides here when we get to provision 7. So any questions about what a certified downstream has to meet? Okay, I'm going to jump into reuse real quick, and then we're going to go back to throughput. I'm just following through the standard as it's written. So we did a lot of work on the reuse section, the refurbishment. And basically, we've categorized 3 different channels for reuse. One we termed R2 ready for reuse, the other R2 ready for resale, and the third R2 ready for repair. So R2 ready for reuse is really those products that you're loading software on, you're testing, it's ready out of the box. If I get it shipped to my house and I take it out of the box, I'm going to plug it in and I'm going to start using it. I don't need to load the operating system. I don't need to configure it. Beyond, it's what you would expect of a new product coming to your house. R2 ready for resale means we've done the functional testing, making sure the key functions are working, and we're reselling it as functioning hardware. But it's not loaded with all the software. It's not ready out of the box. So somebody else has to take that product then and do the final steps. If we're talking about medical equipment, for example, you may test it and you sell it to someone else with it functioning hardware-wise, but then they have to make it patient-ready, for example. And R2 Ready for Repair has been reworked a little bit as well, because really you can't say that, oh, I have all these desktops, they're going for reuse. You're sending them to a refurbisher to test them for you. Your responsibility moving forward is to make sure that those products have a market, a value. You can't just dump it on the next guy and say, oh, he's refurbishing it for me. You have some responsibility to sort and separate and have, maybe you call it a technical cut line. A 20 gig hard drive doesn't have a reuse market, perhaps. So, that needs to go to the recycling chain. You can't dump it in a box and say, oh, it's going to this guy for reuse. So you need to establish those criteria in your process that will make your process flow, and your guys will sort them out based on what has reuse value. So I'm not going to go through all the details there. That's for you to look at. I just talked about being able to determine the viability of the equipment to be repaired or reused. You're not going to take an old floor standing TV probably and tell me that there's a reuse market for that. So you have some responsibility in the process to validate that. And the company you're sending it to do the repair for you or the reuse, you have a responsibility to ensure that they have the tools and the knowledge to repair equipment. A lot of times I see an approved refurbisher who does laptops, for example. And now the company is sending them cell phones. Well, that's not their expertise. They don't have the tools to wipe the cell phones or to repair them. So in this process, when you're qualifying vendors, you also have to demonstrate that that vendor has the knowledge and tools and the processes to be able to repair that type of equipment. One thing, it's in the current standard. A lot of people miss this. The downstream vendor, the refurbisher that you're sending that equipment to, cannot resell the equipment to another vendor to repair. So the first tier vendor that you're sending that LCD monitor to, according to the standard, has to be the guy repairing it. They can only sell tested working equipment. You can't sell it to a guy who then sells it to this guy, who then takes part of it to this guy. That's not in the standard, and it's often overlooked. So whoever you're sending that product to has got to be the person or the company that can fix it, repair it, sell it as tested working.
So Corey, I have a couple questions
Sure.
maybe you can comment on. So if you have a device, say a laptop, that requires a screen repair, in some cases it might be hard to data clear that device before you repair it. What are the requirements for something like that?
Thank you. Well, if it's a laptop, you can probably pull the drive out.
Right. But in the
One
case
way, but like a cell phone, for example, or a tablet, something like that.
Sure.
For repair?
You can't data clear it because it requires repair first.
Oh, okay. So that device is still considered to have data on it. So when we get into provision 8, you'll see the requirements for outsourcing data destruction. So now you have to consider, who am I sending it to? What, if they repair it, can they wipe it or destroy the data? Does it need to come back to me? What's my plan? How am I controlling this device? How am I shipping it? Because now it's leaving my facility and it technically still has data on it. So there's no black or white answer, but these are all the things that you have to consider in figuring out how to make that work in your process.
Thank you.
Okay. One other thing that we also made clear in the new standard is the downstream refurbisher has got to meet the provision 5 requirements for recycling. So if you're sending laptops to a company to test and repair, there's going to be some fallout. of parts or laptops that don't work, that are going to need to be properly managed in the recycling chain. So moving forward, you also have to control that aspect of it to ensure that those components that are removed or replaced, the damaged, the non-working, are recycled properly. Does that make sense? Yes, ma'am.
At what point does your responsibility for these focus materials,
At what point?
at what point?
Yeah, when they're no longer.
Following chain of custody, if it goes to 5 people, you're policing this stuff forever.
Yeah, so when they're no longer a focus material. So what,
It's your responsibility to, whether it goes through.
to follow it or to ensure that the chain meets the
It
requirement?
goes to the person you sell it to, you have to follow it from there. What is that person's responsibility? Say it goes to 3 different people before it is not a focus material anymore. Where does your responsibility stop on that material?
Yeah. So you're actually not following each individual piece of equipment.
That's what it sounds like.
right.
You're following it downstream.
You're following the path, right? Where are these products going? And you're validating that path. So
I would say you're validating the person that you're selling to, then your responsibility ought to end there. Then if they're certified, their responsibility should pick up when they take custody of that product.
right, so if we get into tracking throughput here, your responsibility is to know where it's going. It's their responsibility to track to the next level.
I didn't see many hands go up when you asked who was certified,
Yeah.
so there's probably,
Yeah.
this is kind of boggling me on
Right.
what you're saying. If you already have safety rules in place and you're OSHA certified and what you're, basically what it sounds like is you have to have a special program for electronics.
Yeah.
Even if you already deal with mercury switches or other hazardous materials.
Right, so let's just step aside and we know that this is an R2 requirement, but realize that focus materials have some type of hazardous material in them.
Right.
And when you look at the EPA regulations, you're responsible from cradle to grave. So you should know by those regulations where your material is going anyway.
Right.
So R2 is just putting those additional measures in place with some of these.
It sounds to me like you have to follow it everywhere it goes. Most of the time, when anyone sells a product, it doesn't just go here.
That's the difference, right there. You hit the nail on the head. You know, the change in the industry is that you can't just take product in and then just sell it to the highest bidder or auction it off. If it contains a focus material and it's not working, right? So if you test it and you are able to qualify it as a working product, then then you're done. That can be sold anywhere. But it's when you take in equipment that you want to sell to 20, 50 different people, that you haven't qualified as working, it's still a focus material, then yes, that's the difference. An R2 certified company has to manage that downstream.
No, what I'm saying is, I'm not gonna sell it to 50 or 20 different people, I'm selling it to one person. So, for example, if I'm R2 certified, I've checked out my buyer, he's R2 certified, I sell him the material, I should no longer be responsible for that. His R2 certification should pick up and say, now he's responsible.
Yes.
But what it sounds like you're saying is I'm responsible until it is not a focus material anymore, whether that goes through 3 different hands or whether it's sold to one person and gets smelted right away.
It's getting a little confusing, right? I mean, there's a lot of different avenues that this could go.
And it's the path that you're checking out initially to do the downstream due diligence.
Right.
You're not doing it for every single shipment and following this can all the way through. I'm following the path to make sure that my downstream vendor is okay. and that his downstream vendors are okay. Once I've made that determination that yes, they are complying with my focus material management plan, you can go ahead and use them. But once again, you're not traveling and following this every single shipment all the way through.
So if you're using a certified downstream, yes, it eliminates a lot of what you have to do. Because like you said, they become responsible then at that point. There are a couple things that you still need to have ownership of. For example, the legal export, if it's being exported at some point in that chain, or knowing what vendors it's going to till it's no longer a focus material. But that's the point of the R2, of using an R2 certified vendor, is it reduces the amount that you have to do.
It also reduces the liability.
Absolutely.
That's the main,
Theoretically, it should.
that's the main thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Mike?
It's like the difference if I sell a load of whole circuit boards to somebody who shreds them and then sells them to a refiner. I need to know who I sold it to, and I need to know who he's sending it to, and now I'm done. But if I sell a whole PC to someone, how do I follow that chain of custody?
Right, so when you sell that whole PC, what's the next guy doing with it? If he's refurbishing it and making a working product, right, you just have to think about the things that might come out of it. You know, they replace the battery on the motherboard or something like that. If you're selling it to someone and they are separating it, right, into a CD-ROM, circuit board, battery, power supply, now all these other components have focus materials in them. And if they're going different directions, now, you know, it becomes very complex.
So, but I think in following her question, if I sell a whole PC, I need to know the 6 channels that he's sending those components to. The steel's going here, CD-ROM's going here, power supply's going here, circuit boards and RAM going here, wire going here, and I know those things. But then I've done my due diligence downstream.
Then it's over, right?
Well, if I sell.
It's not a black and white, you know, it's not
No,
black and white. It's,
I think this is
Yeah.
practically addressing your question.
Yeah.
If I sell a whole PC,
yeah,
there's 6 commodities, just say.
Right.
That are gonna come out of that, and I know where my vendor is selling those 6 commodities, and that would be following up on my downstream.
okay,
As good as I could do in a.
right. But if it's still a circuit board that goes then to your second example, then you have to know where it's going through that chain. Pardon me?
I guess I'm being facetious, it's just, it's a complex, it's a whole business in itself.
So
It's different.
let me just,
I know that they're hazardous material.
right, so there are 352 sites as of March 1st certified to R2. The reason people are getting certified is because clients are requiring certification. They want to use responsible recyclers. And in a lot of the states are now requiring it to be an electronics collector. So that is why. Now, I'm just going to ask if we can kind of move on and keep going because we're running a little behind schedule. So.
And we can talk more at the end, hopefully. So provision 7, so you need to track non-focus materials just one level. You'd be able to show the BOLs of where's your plastic going, where's your metal going. All other materials that include the focus materials have to be tracked like we talk about. We have to be able to demonstrate with business documents, you know, where that material is going. One of the things I want to clarify, and I think we've kind of talked about it roundabout here, is if you are R2 certified, you do not get to say, I'm certified, I don't got to tell you where it's going. The requirement in the standard is that you still need to tell your customer when required, who's also going for R2 certification, where the material is going, the focus material. not the commodities. If you take those boards and you turn it into a non-focus material, you don't have to disclose where those commodities are going or where that tested equipment is going, who your markets are. This is not looking to infringe on business. But for the focus materials, there needs to be transparency of where batteries are going. So I just want to make that clear.
What happens if that R2 person won't tell you what they're doing with circuit boards?
Well, under the new standard, I suppose you could lodge a complaint with the certification body.
And get them decertified?
Well, I can't,
Common sense, unfortunately, circuit boards obviously have a high value, and we want to be able to sell to the best home. And unfortunately, in order to certify facility, I'm sure they don't want to disclose that information.
yeah. Well, and the standard, the way it's written, it says that it has to be disclosed with the reasonable controls or something to that effect, which means... Which means if you're the customer asking for the information and you're not willing to sign an NDA, a non-circumvent agreement, whatever, then they are compliant because you're not willing to do that. Yeah. The certification bodies. Whoever, if it's Perry Johnson or it's Orion or NSF, one of the 6, each certification body has a process to handle complaints.
By using the correct pathway, how do you protect yourself or your company's vendors and protect your line of business during these downstream requests?
Protect yourself from what?
Well, if I'm telling you everywhere I'm selling it, why next time do you just not go to that person instead of channeling it through me?
Right, and that's what I was saying. Within the standard, you have the option, the way it's written, that to require a contractual agreement of confidentiality, of non-circumvent, whatever it is, that would protect you in that manner. You don't have to just freely make it public, is the point. The standard is written such that you can require those controls. So I gotta keep moving here real quick. Tracy tells me I have 5 minutes. All right, so data destruction, here's what I want to point out. Having software that says DOD 5220.22 compliant does not meet the requirement. You need to read NIST 800-88 because you have all these other requirements within there to meet the data destruction requirement. They include the security of the material that's not wiped. We talked about that when shipping to another vendor. Independent validation, quality controls, security controls, records of wiping or shredding. These are all requirements already there in the current standard in NIST 800-88. So what we try to do is pull it out, make it a little bit clearer. We talked specifically about outsourcing data destruction. I think we talked about that a little bit. Storage. One of the things we'll make clear is it has to be stored in full legal compliance. If you're, for example, removing batteries from equipment, from a laptop or whatever, those batteries now become, in most places, a universal waste. And they have requirements for labeling, and they have requirements for storage. So think about that in the storage of your materials and how you're handling that. Security also now extends to any collection points. From the moment that you take possession of a customer's material, in your security plan, you need to consider how you're securing that. That equipment from, first of all, theft or from data theft and so forth. Insurance, I just want to point out, this has been made a little bit more flexible because today it requires pollution liability coverage. So that was a little overbearing on some smaller, like a memory reseller, for example. So the way we did it was you can do a evaluation of your risk. Your insurance company can do it and decide how much environmental coverage, pollution coverage you need. There's requirements for transportation, for validating transporters, for validating their history, their compliance history. They have all the legal permits and there's record keeping. So one last thing, the standard is the standard, but then we have the implementation of the standard, the certification bodies. How do we improve quality, ensure that it's being applied the same across the board? What you're going to see is what's called the R2 Code of Practices, which are all the rules of the certification program. So things like communications between the certification bodies, accreditation bodies, logo usage rules could be in there, training. This is all still being worked out, but I just want to give you a heads up that there's a accompanying document that will outline the whole certification program. So timelines, real quick. We expect by June the standard to be released. We anticipate that by September, the end of September probably, we'll be winding down all those companies that are in the queue right now that could be certified to R2 2008. And then from that point, there would be no more 2008 audits. You would have to upgrade to the new standard in order to maintain or to get R2 certification. Yes, sir. Yeah, I mean, it depends on your company on how you implement, what resources you put at it. I can tell you, I've been a consultant, and I can typically go into a company and from start to finish in about 4 months. But it depends on how big it is, how complex it is, how many resources you have to do it. Yeah.
But there are people out there, as yourself, that will help with the certification and get you going in the right direction and help people towards the certification.
Yeah. That's where a consultant is really helpful because, there are specific requirements here. And, it's just knowing what the auditor is going to be looking for. Thank you, ma'am.
And also remember, if you join ISRI and RIOS, you get the RIOS implementation guide, which also has a lot of R2 information in it. So you get some of those templates to help you get through that process, as well as the support of other companies within ISRI that are already certified or peers in the industry that can help you do that. And it might be a more cost-effective way as well.
All right. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Corey. And so next we have Paula Este up. Paula is the Quality Environmental Health and Safety Manager for Schnitzer Steel Industries, metals recycling business. She holds a master's in management from Cambridge College. She is an REB QSA certified auditor, and she's an ISRI RIOS board member. She brings over 15 years of senior quality managerial experience, including development and implementation of world-class QEHS systems and operations, with over 10 years experience in high volume domestic and international operations. So please welcome Paula.
Thank you. So I'm first going to step up. I know it's a really nice flip chart down here. So I wanted to start off with, I heard a little bit earlier about, why you guys are here, right? So why, I wanted to know more about that. I saw from a quick, poll that was taken by Corey that it's only about 20% of you here that actually are R2 certified right now, right? So this big thing, so why are we here? I work for Schnitzer Steel. this good? Whoa. So why did we do what we, oh, that's really loud. So why did we do it? We wanted to do it because we wanted to improve. Okay? Safety and information were the big pieces why we wanted to do it. There's other things that I heard here that were going on, right? In regards to states, correct, right? We got regulatory pieces. We have customer demand. Are there other reasons? Why else? Why are you guys here? It's not a trick question.
Make more money.
Make more money. Good one.
Standardization.
Thank you. Standardize. Anything else?
Risk management.
Risk management. Those are some great ones. I'm going to take this off. Sorry. So I want to find out why we're here, because we're starting off with, and let me see how this thing works. Yeah, I'm going to stand here. Just click the mouse. There we go. So I wanted to give a little background on RIOS, Recycling Industry Operating Standard, all right, and what it actually does. So what is RIOS, right? And then there's some core structure pieces with it that actually directly overlap with R2. And it really sets the backbone for establishing a structure inside of your organization to build your R2 management system, all right? And it incorporates the footprint. And then we're also looking at a change to the RIOS process right now. The board is actually looking at that. And we're aligning it directly with R2, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well. So from the management system piece, why, right? What is it? Everybody talks about a management system. When we're talking about a management system, you already do it every day. We all do it every day. We all operate. We all have some form of procedures in how we operate and what we do. We all have safety requirements or environmental requirements in doing those things. But when we look at a management system, it's actually a model for how we can manage that information and data and improve it on a day-to-day basis, right? How do we continually improve those pieces? Quality, operations, environmental, and health and safety. When we're looking at RIOS, one of the big things that I wanted to do for Schnitzer Steel, and when we were looking at what standard to look at, we looked at 9001, which is quality, 14001, which is environmental, and OSAS 18001 for safety. We really wanted an integrated standard. Because one of the big pieces we wanted to do is they're not separate things. We don't just operate. I don't stop and then go do safety. I don't stop and then do environmental. It's how we operate. It needs to be continuous, a flow. Standardization, one of the big pieces that we wanted to do. So that's why we chose the RIOS model. And when we look at RIOS, what is it really? It's a building block process, right? It defines a policy, come up with what's your mission. Plan, implement, checking, management, review. Every management system structure has these building blocks in it, whether it's TS 16949 for the automotive, or whether it's ISO 1345 for the medical. All the management systems have these structures within them. So when we're looking at the RIOS requirements, it follows right into those exact building blocks, right? We have our general requirements, a policy, planning, we implement, we check it, and we have a management review. So what does RIOS require in those pieces of it, right? So it's going to set the backbone for what we need to look at. So we start off with management, right? Management commitment. What are we really trying to set? What's the vision? What do we want to do with the management system structure, right? What a management system piece has in the model of RIOS is it looks at setting a structure for inputs and outputs, right? So when you have your management reviews, we already have them now. Right, we're all doing meetings now. We're looking at the information of how we operate. It's incorporating some additional pieces into that of a structure role to look at a management system performance, right? So that's what internal audits come into play, right? Corrective action, preventative action, statuses. Any type of changes to the organization, recommendations for improvement. Is the management system and the structure that we're establishing really effective? Is it really doing what we thought it would do? If it's not, then let's change it to do that. So that's where the outputs come into play, right? Decisions, what's the action for change? Do we need any additional resources? And any type of improvements. whether it's from an operations, a process, or actually the product itself. Looking at that. Rios then goes on to talk about the mission, right? To set your own mission. What's the QEHS policy? Quality, environmental, and health and safety. One integrated standard. So when we look at setting the mission, though, we want to look at, what's appropriate to your organization. It should be specific to yourself. Each organization has their own, goals and roles and how they want to commit and what the mission is for the organization. So the other thing that's specific, though, in regards to the model of RIOS, right? We look at any of these management system models. It doesn't really tell us how to do stuff, right? It tells you when you build it, include these things in it. So when you're when you're defining what your mission is going to be, a QEHS policy, it should include specific things, right? Like a commitment to comply with customer requirements, preventing workplace injuries and illness, preventing pollution, right? And then continually improving all of those, quality, environmental, health, and safety. The next step it goes on to talk about is setting some structure for management roles and responsibilities. Who does what when? Why? From a bigger picture perspective. Defining what the management system roles are going to be within it. Who's going to be the management system representative? You need to define who that's going to be, who's going to lead it and champion the process going forward. One of the other things that RIOS talks about from the Recycling Industry Operating Standard is it actually looks at defining somebody specifically for safety. I talked about Schnitzer's scope in regards to what we wanted to do. We really wanted to enhance our safety programs in defining a senior management role for safety. The other thing it looks at is ensuring the necessary resources that we can support what we do every day in what we're doing for roles and obligations. So the management system doesn't tell you that you have to do these things. It says when you look at setting up a structure for roles and responsibilities, it says look at your personnel, your facilities, your operations. How does it work for you, right? It's not telling you how to do it. It's not saying that you need 20, 30 people to do task A. It's a flexibility type process. It's telling you that when you do build your management system, define what your roles are. Who is supposed to do what? So when we look at management, it's a building block process, right? We have management review, the policy, management structure, resources and facilities, and then we have our QEHS footprint. Corey talked a little bit about touched on the footprint a little bit. So when we look at the footprint, it really divides up into two separate things. The footprint for quality, environmental health, and safety is how are we going to improve on those subjects. And the second piece is how do we do it every day, right? Continually improve and standardize operations. So the footprint really breaks down into several other pieces when we look at it in more detail. We have product, legal, and other requirements, and then we have important environmental aspects and impacts, and then health and safety risks. From product, legal, and other requirements, we have to define what our customer requirements are, right? Environmental, health, and safety, legal requirements, right? What are we obligated to do as an organization across the board? Then we look at the other two bubbles that go on, right? Important environmental aspects and impacts and health and safety risks. When we look at those from the footprint perspective, it's actually looking at structure for how do we improve on those. From a structure standpoint, on important environmental impacts, what RIOS is actually saying is to create a process on your own. It doesn't tell you how to do it. It says develop your own methodology, right? Identify how you interact with the environment, right? Prioritize those. And then when you're developing that list of how you interact with the environment for a continual improvement program, you need to include routine and non-routine activities, emergency situations, and looking at the whole scope of your organization, so looking at activities, products, and services. So it doesn't tell us how to do it. It says come up with your own methodology, which is a risk assessment, right? We're looking at risks assessments. So we do that. It's looking at what do we do for processes? What from those processes that we do in-house, inside of our organization, how do those impact the environment? Coming up with that list, right? And then from that list, developing a criteria for how we rank that list, all right? So we rank the list, which is an assessment. From that, we need to document our terms and procedure and then define which ones we're going to work on, right? So what comes to the top? Is it top 1, 2, 3? We get to define what that is. But it's coming up with a continual improvement program on how we interact with the environment. And it's basically an annual planning process and setting goals. And then also taking into account change management, because as we grow as organizations and we change our infrastructure and grow the company, it'll also change how we interact with the environment. So it's going back and making it a living document, and when we make changes, how does that change our ranking criteria? How does that change our list of aspects? And going forward with that. So the next piece is on the important health and safety risks, right? Still in the QEHS footprint, exact same structure as important environmental aspects, right? Doesn't tell us how to do it, it says come up with your own process. This time, instead of looking at how we interact with the environment, then we're gonna look at hazards. What hazards do we have in our day-to-day operations inside our own buildings and structures and how we operate? So it says identify the current hazards, what you actually have, and then prioritize them based on existing controls that you have in place. And then determine on those, what's a tolerable risk, what's not actionable, and coming up with an action plan. So again, the process is identical to aspects and impacts in regards to take into account routine and non-routine activities, right? Activities, products, and services, and looking at emergency situations. Doesn't tell you the method. It says come up with your own method of a risk assessment for hazards, right? Continual improvement program. Document your approach. Come up with a documented procedure on how that's done. The HIRA, Hazard ID Risk Assessment. You include the scope, work activities. One of the things that I do in my organization, we have a tremendous amount of steps that go on. In regards to doing a hazard ID risk assessment, we grouped things, right, based on exposure groups, all right, to be able to manage the amount of information that had to go on. So we took a tiered approach to it. We grouped it, and then we broke it down step by step, and going through our HIRA process. All right, but from the RIOS standpoint, from a structure and from the management system standpoint, it's developing that process, and that process needs to be repeatable no matter who's doing it. So you have to have a documented methodology, it should be repeatable, it should be evaluated based on existing controls in place when we look at hazards, and you have to document your terms, procedures, and reasoning behind it. The important health and safety risks, whatever comes up important, you turn into goals. Those become your goals. Aspects and impacts, whatever comes to the top in regards to your ranking methodology now becomes a goal. That's how we do our improvement programs on those. From the hazard ID process, if we look at it and take a step back from a higher level, it's looking at the work activities. What do we do day to day? Classifying those, right? Grouping them, you can. You can group them. It's up to you on how you want to manage your hazards, all right? Then you determine what the risk is. That's your ranking methodology. You've got to come up with a ranking of how we rank it. Determine if the risk is tolerable, and then prepare an action plan. All right? From that action plan, you're going to review the process and go back through it. That's from the continual improvement side. So we're trying to continually improve for environmental and safety. Right? Improvement planning in regards to RIO says take into account environmental safety. And then what about operations on the quality side? What about customers? And you need to set goals. They may be applicable to the RIOS member company, be specific. You could do overall arching goals. You could do specific to departments. It all depends on how you want to manage your own infrastructure, all right? Remember, the standard doesn't tell us how to do it. It says when you build it, take these things into account, right? So in building it and setting your goals, take into account something that's feasible, technologically doable, right? Financially operational. Business requirements. What do we have existing for goals? Do we have a corporate office that sets the goals? It's taking all those pieces into account and packaging that information. It's something that we can do all the time going forward. So standardized operations. Things we do every day, right? We have documented procedures for how we operate. We have to train. We have operational controls, right, which come into operational controls rolls over with documented procedures. How do we repeatably do what we do every day, right? Monitor and measure our processes internally. Emergency preparedness and response, right? Core piece of any organization. If the fire alarm goes off, where are we supposed to go? Right? I mean, that's just at everybody's organization. Maintenance and calibration. QEH management system audits. We should have an internal audit program. From an integrated perspective, looking at all of them with quality, environmental health, and safety at the same time is extremely efficient, I have to say. Instead of going out and trying to do quality audits or safety audits or environmental audits, you're going back to the maintenance department 3 times, right? Instead, just do it once, right? From an efficiency standpoint. An integrated management system is time saving, absolutely. The other piece is look at you have to have a non-conformance corrective action program. How do we make change, right? How do we correct any type of customer complaint? How do we correct items from audits? And then we look at control of a non-conforming product. Do you guys have any questions about RIOS? I went over it really quick, and by the way, I have a bad Boston accent. I apologize. So let's start with the second one first. In regards to the RIOS management system, you actually get a book that will come with your registration, right? When you sign up to be a charter member, you'll receive a copy of the standard, and you'll also receive the implementation guide. That implementation guide will have templates on how to do everything I just talked about. So it'll actually have a hazard assessment inside of it already that's done, that you can utilize, you can modify it, but it'll at least give you a starting point to build from, to customize it to how your organization does it. In regards to the deep dive portion of it, it's up to you. How far do you guys want to go? The advice that I have on that is to start off at one level and then work your way down. It's just more manageable. You don't want to bite off more than you can chew in the beginning. So it just, go ahead.
If there is a typical title of somebody that could typically be the project manager in an organization to own this or implement this? Is it an environmental health and safety person, or is there some other title that would be more fitting for the RIOS portion of the R2TMRIOS implementation?
I've seen everything from the operations manager to the director of operations to a safety, environmental engineer.
So I also think
depends. Go ahead. Yeah.
I also think it's important. It's not that one person who's going to do it. As Paula said before, this is going to be how you operate, right? So it takes everybody really as a team. And I have operations managers and floor supervisors writing procedures, and they send them to me, and I review and I finalize and add them to the system. So it's really a team effort. And it's going to take all aspects of your organization.
And on the other end of the spectrum, I've also seen very small organizations like companies with 3 people use an outside resource, leverage a consultant, for example, who manages all their EH&S programs for the company remotely. So there's there's all kinds of different ways to approach it. And there's different, with the cloud and technology today, ways to solve the problem. Not just internally, not that you have to, hire a full-time person for that, but there's creative ways to be able to meet your needs that way.
Nice. Does anybody have any other questions? So it is beyond the driest subject ever. I just have to tell you that. It is tough. It's dry. I've been doing this a long time with ISO 9, starting with the original ISO 9001 system back in 1990. We'll leave it at that. All right.
I'll ask you a question.
Sure.
RIOS sounds like a common sense approach at SLT.
Mm-hmm.
You are simplified. But in here it says to further transparency between RIOS and R2. R2 to me sounds very prickly, strictly, there's this set of rules that
Well, do you want to?
So I just wanted to take the opportunity to clarify the difference between the two. So, RIOS is meant much like ISO 14001 or 9001, it's broader topic to apply to many different types of businesses and industry. You know, whereas R2 is specific to electronics recycling. You know, it's industry best practices. So, you know, R2 is really saying that here are the generally agreed to industry best practices for electronics recycling. It's sometimes hard to.
What I really want to ask is we're really not into electronics, so I don't want to speak out of turn and sound dumb or whatever. But why would my rules be so much more stringent on a PC battery than they are on an oil battery? And it's common sense. They're both a hazardous material. You have to use a special way to. But you don't have to follow that oil battery 5 years down the road.
Well, I mean, I don't know. In my book, you should, right?
You do to a point, but most of the time, once you sell it to the reputable person, your responsibility for it is done.
Right. So
Track of what they're doing with it.
in an automotive battery, you're probably already doing some level of due diligence,
Right.
right? Because of Superfund liability.
Or maybe I'm misunderstanding your explanation of R2, where you have to do due diligence all the way down.
Yeah, I would love to talk to you more about it and try to hash it out and help answer your questions. You know, so, you know, I'm here to help you. Let's talk afterwards and we'll see if we can figure it out.
Just to clarify what you're saying with the lead acid battery, your lead acid battery stops when you change it from, right, the dipole in those states with the lead and it's processed by the price agency. But your other batteries you're talking about, your lithium ion and whatnot, you still have to do your due diligence to make sure it goes to reputable companies, right? Basically,
Yeah, but what I'm saying is your liability doesn't stop there with that.
if you did sue a reputable company.
So, I mean, you know, your lead acid battery, there's a lot of companies that will take back lead acid batteries, right? They sell the batteries, they take them back. But then those batteries are then going where? I mean, if it's a small sealed lead acid battery, it might go to this smelter or breaker. If it's a larger battery, it might go to this, you know, and so there's a level of response. You need to know where it's going. I mean, even in the U.S. under Superfund liability, you know, that could hurt you down the road. I mean, you know, ISRI offers the ISRI reports, right? So it kind of all falls into the same due diligence category.
So from a management systems perspective, R2 is specific for electronics. There's AS9100, which is for the aerospace, which is a lot more demanding on the quality side from an infrastructure standpoint. In regards to reporting on information from your internal quality piece to your registrar, it's a different ballgame. TS16949, which is for the automotive industry, they have, you know, production part approval processes and advanced product quality planning requirements that they have to do, which is much more higher than the ISO 9001. All of those are similar in regards to what we have with the electronics industry, where it's specific to an industry demand at that time. All right? So I don't really see it as any more different than that. In regards to RIOS, from the Recycling Industry Operating Standard, it sets the backbone to support those, just like ISO 9001 does. ISO 9001 sets the backbone to go TS16949. All right, that's what RIOS does as well. It gives you an integrated management system, which is unusual in the ISO worlds, right? There really isn't anything comparable out there to that at this time, which makes it a lot more streamlined in regards to how we manage information and data, which is really where I wanted to go from a company standpoint. They are not separate things, right? They just, from safety, environmental, and quality. It's just how we operate. It's transparency, building that process. So in regards to the revision, we are actually working on a revision right now, and Corey and I are on the RIOS board together. The revision to RIOS is actually based on the R2 revision, and we're trying to clarify some definitions that were in there, as well as to just really establish a true backbone for R2 to build off of. All right, there's no substantial changes in regards to if you're already RIOS certified at this point. all right? It just more aligns the paragraphs, numbers, and structuring, and those sorts of things. So it's building transparency between the two, and it's a clarification of the definitions is the big piece, which I think is going to be really helpful for a lot of organizations. So from a wrap-up, trying to build transparency, right? Something I do every day. I've said it 4 or 5 times. Core environmental health and safety. It's just how we operate. This is how we operate. We approached RIOS, approached it from the perspective of how do we want to change the organization, how do we want to make it better, and then we're going to utilize this model to do that. That's how we approached it. And looking at how did we want to manage data and information from doc control to training to all the different elements inside of RIOS. The largest piece, and I believe you're going to talk more about this, from the implementation perspective, is on operational controls. One of the questions was how long does it take to get certified? One of the biggest pieces is what do you already have existing today? If pieces aren't there already today, that's where I see the largest time sink can be, is because you're establishing that core structure already. Or you have to establish it in the first place if you don't have it.
How much does it cost to get certified? Do you know the revenue per year, or what is it based on?
So there's a couple of fee structures. Do you want to talk about it? So there's.
Go for it.
Go for it. No, go ahead.
No, all I was going to say is cost of certification really depends, right? So your certification body coming out is going to look at the number of employees and what certifications you want to get certified to, and they have a calculation that they do that basically tells them how many days they have to be on site, and they can base your costs off that. But you're also going to have internal costs, right? If you've already got the resource, you've got policies, you've got procedures, you've got all the regulatory things you already need, you're not going to have many internal costs. But if you don't have...
Honestly, I'll tell you. The lowest? If you've got everything in place, I mean, you're just looking at audit costs, and you're probably somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000. Yes. If you have no resources, nothing in place, you need outside help, you could be anywhere, depending on your size, complexity, for the implementation costs, up to $50,000, I'd say. It depends, I mean.
I think more.
Well, it could be more.
It could be more.
It depends on what's existing.
Yeah, I mean,
And if you have gaps in safety and environmental, like you don't have the structured programs already that we're technically already obligated to have, that's where the cost sink is going to come.
Well, and think about resources. I
Potentially.
mean,
So
when I say 50, well, your implementation cost is a one-time fee, sure. I mean, we're talking labor costs, right? Either you're going to do it internally, and there's a cost to taking a resource.
Yeah.
About that, and I think Bob will be talking a little bit more about this. Or you're going to pay someone externally to come in and help you.
right, and that's what the fees are. Great, thank you.
Thanks, Paula. So like Corey said, Bob McCarthy's up next, and he's going to talk to you guys about what it takes to implement a program. And then we'll take a quick break, come back, and then we have Bardia, who is going to talk about getting certified, and he works for Perry Johnson. And then we've got some industrial experience after that. So Bob McCarthy, he's a partner in Green Eye Partners, and Bob has over 15 years experience in the electronics recycling industry, including positions in asset, marketing manager, and VP of business development. Bob's specialties include reuse, refurbishment, data security, management system implementation, and downstream vendor auditing. So please welcome Bob.
Does this work? Outstanding. I'm going to change up the first 5 minutes because there's a lot of good discussion that we talked about. I'm going to be talking about what to do to get certified. What preparation do you need to do? I want to spend 5 minutes on why, because I'm passionate about it, because I'm hearing something, well, why do we want to be R2 or RIOS and that? And it's a big deal. Like Tracy said, I have about 15 years of experience in the industry, and I gotta tell you, back in the early 2000s, the most frustrating thing for me was going out, working with clients, and having them say, you know what? I have John's pickup truck service that comes by every Friday, and they pick up this pallet of stuff in the warehouse. Any of you guys run into anybody like that in your areas? So they pick it up for free. Why on earth would I want to pay you 25 cents a pound? Well, a couple things has happened over the last 10 years. Corporations and our customers are getting very nervous about it. Here's why. I think there's 4 big risks companies have today, which are our customers. Can any of you guys raise your clue on what some of those risks are? Environmental. So you have an environmental risk that they have to worry about. How about another one?
Data security.
Bingo. I'm not a teacher, otherwise my writing would be way nicer. Public image. I call that the logo. You know, they have the brand logo that they want to make sure that they're taken care of. What's another one, a 4th one? Liability. Yeah, the economical side. Whether they want to make sure they're getting a good value. Not necessarily the cheapest, they want to get a good value of what they're doing. And a piece of this $sign is from the liability side. They don't want to get sued. What R2 and RIOS, that enables us as the recyclers and refurbishers to play right in the heart of their risk and say, you know what? We can come in and take care of this for you. Let me give you a couple real life examples, and it's public knowledge. So Honeywell up in Minneapolis, back in the early 2000s, they said, hey, we have an employee, we donate our material to employees if they want it. And then for the stuff that's left over, then we will go ahead and send that off to the recycler. In about 2007, Minnesota EPA gets a call from the DNR up in northern Minnesota, because guess what? They found a whole cabin that had been abandoned with a pole barn, and there was electronics everywhere. You had it outside, you had it inside that whole works. They did an internal investigation. Guess what? That employee who they were donating material to was storing it. Here's a pet rack. Kept it all up there. Guess who got to do the cleanup cost? Guess who got to do the cleanup cost of all that soil underneath the material? Yeah, it wasn't the employee that they donated it to. It was Honeywell. Huge. All of a sudden, guess what? That 25 cents per pound doesn't matter that much, does it? If you can come in as a customer or as a recycler and say, you know what? We can do these things for you. We can protect you environmentally. We can protect you from a data security perspective. We can protect your brand logo. How huge is that? How many of your customers do you think want to be broadcast on Channel 5 News saying, yes, we just saw a computer with your brand logo in a dump. What do you want to say about that? Well, that customer's going to go, well, I gave it to a recycler. And you know what? That recycler gave me a nice little piece of paper right here that says it was recycled responsibly. Does this piece of paper mean anything? No. You know what? I have a nephew who's 6 who could do the same exact thing in Microsoft Word, I bet. He probably can do a better job because little kids are way better at the computer than we are as adults. unless you can provide a certificate of recycling that has teeth behind it, it is worthless. And that's where this opportunity is huge for us, because it allows us to show value to them and to protect them. Because now, you know what? They're not going to have to worry about the logo showing up, and some dump in China in 60 minutes is doing, following, with a secret camera, a container somewhere, only to show that, oh wow, here's Thomson Reuters. Oh wow, here's IBM. Here's Honeywell. Here's 3M. How much do you think it costs to fix the logo image? Exactly. So when someone asks me, well, why would I want to become R2 or have all these different certifications? The customers are starting to demand it. And I can tell you right now, those who are going to be selling against you. Because you know what? I would immediately come and say, this piece of paper they're giving you with a certificate of destruction is 100% meaningless without the teeth. And right now, I think it's right up around, 375 companies are now R2 certified? 375 of your competitors are certified because they know that their customer is asking for it. And for those who don't become certified, it makes it that much more easier for those 375 companies to go out and take your business. But I gotta tell you, from a business perspective, from your guys' business, it makes your job way easier on bringing in new business and the high quality business. Because now you can start working with the companies that have the high-end servers. That all works where there's some really good value from a reuse perspective. Make sense? Any questions in regards to that? Remember those 4 points. It makes your job selling it way easier, and it gives you and your organization every reason why you want to become R2 RIO certified. So having said that, all right, so now that we know why we want to become certified, how do you do the certification piece? Another real life scenario. Man, I like to walk too much. Well, but then I'm going to be double echoing, so that'll be good. Just give me a handcuff. We're going to be right here. I was working with a company who said, hey, I need to become R2 certified in 6 weeks. I'm like, holy cow. All right. Have you read the standard? No. Do I need to read the standard? I thought you guys did all of that. I don't care if you have an outside consultant helping you or whomever it is, you need to read the standards. So you can download the R2 standards and you become a RIOS member so you can have access to the full manual like Tracy has mentioned. The next thing you need to do is once you have the standard, you understand the standard, is to do a gap analysis. And what a gap analysis is where are you today? A real life snapshot of this is how we do things today, this is our standard operating procedure, to where we need to be to become certified and where we're going to be in the future. That bridge or that gap is what we need to get implemented in prior to you becoming certified. Then you need to choose and train an in-house person to manage the process. And this person needs to have somebody that has the time and the skill. I've heard a couple people say, well, how long does this take? I'll talk about it later, but honestly, I've seen it take anywhere from 6 to 9 months even, depending how large the organization is. And that's really dependent upon the person that you select. If that person, already is behind on projects routinely and they have 1,000 things on the plate and they're working late already, that's probably not a good candidate for someone to head up this project of yours. And then you need to make sure that you give that person some responsibility and the ability to act on that. It's almost like giving a dog, to protect a home, and that dog has no barking ability. You got to be able to have have a dog with some bark to it. And it was mentioned a little bit earlier as well that sometimes it's helpful to have an outside consultant come in. If you feel that you need that help, or if there isn't somebody within your organization that's gone through a 9001 or an ISO implementation, there's outside consultants that are more than willing to come and help you out with that as well. By the way, I take questions whenever you want them, so you can just shoot them or just yell. Go ahead.
How's this recognized through lead certification?
Say that again?
How's this program recognized through lead? Like, you have a company that's lead certified, and everything they're trying to do is to get the green points and that certification.
So I,
You know-
so I know what that is.
Perfect.
So you can absolutely integrate the two of them together in regards to how you manage your data for lead. You utilize the RIO standard in regards to how you manage your suppliers as part of your supplier management program. You take into account quality, environmental safety, and the lead points, right? I mean, it's just building it all together. Absolutely, you can integrate it for sure.
All right, the R2 requirements, they're built on the Environmental Health and Safety Management System, which we've just talked about a lot. And the RIOS is a quality environmental health and safety management system designed specifically for the recycling industry. It incorporates the environmental 14,001, the 9,001 from the quality, and the 18,001 for the health and safety side. And then RIOS satisfies the R2 requirement for the environmental health and safety management side. So a lot of people, what you'll see if you're becoming R2, you also are becoming RIOS, because that makes a great foundation for your R2 standard. RIOS has the 6 main sections. I'm just going to fly through this stuff because we just spent the past 2 talking about these. But 6 sections: general requirements, policy planning, implementation, checking, and corrective action, management reviews. Here's a piece though. When you're taking a look at those sections, whenever you see the word shall, highlight it, emphasize it. Those are requirements. Those are items that your auditor, that I'm sure that you'll be talking about, those are the things that they'll be looking for. So highlight the word shall and make sure that those get done. Use the RIOS guidance documents. They have great tools to them. The membership pays for itself. You'll want to do that. And then take the time to identify environmental health, the aspects of the health and safety hazards. Here's the deal on that. When you're taking a look at your aspects and the different hazards, take a look at them as if there's no controls. That's how you want to originally take a look at it. So for example, if I'm shredding circuit boards and I have a nice shredder system, assume that the only thing you have is a shredder. And that's how I take a look at it. So what are some of the hazards that that shredder can have from the environmental perspective?
Lead dust.
Correct, lead dust. So that's one of the hazards you could have, and that could be the risk. Now, the control that you might put in place is some filtration systems and then maybe a bag house to collect the dust. So when you're assessing your operation, assess it as if there is not any controls in place, and that you're going to put the controls in place to bring that risk down. The R2 requirements, there's 13 requirements. Building on RIOS, there's a requirement for an EHS policy, a EHS management system, and identification legal requirements. Exports, this is now going to be different for R2 2013. If you guys weren't in here earlier for Corey's, but it must be written for both non-OECD countries and OECD countries. Is that correct, Corey? Yep. Okay.
Question.
Yes.
Got a question. The consulting firms that are involved in implementation, do they give guidance or help in getting the importing country to respond to this question? There's an OECD country, say South Korea, that you've been to their site, you look at doing things the right way, it's best practices, but getting them to involve the government to have that conversation, is there
I am not sure.
So I think it depends on which consulting firm. So Bob is a new partner in Green Eye, and I see Kelly in the back saying, "Yes, we'll do it." So I think it depends on what consulting firm you're working with. And the governments and the regulatory agencies do have assistance available as well.
And what I found is that when I'm having customers that are having an issue getting the type of information that they need, the real reality of it is, if they don't give it to you, they want your business. You'll take the business away from them.
I was going to make that point. The companies that are being sold to, they have every motivation to give you that, to make sure that you know that it's legal to import that into that country. So you're not going to communicate with a country's government. You're communicating with the company that's being sold to.
Yeah, and I'd just like to make the comment, I know in talking with the US EPA, I mean, they're willing and eager to help in that respect. So I encourage you to call them.
Like going to the rabbi, you know, the right answer kind of thing.
Yeah. Conduct an E&H hazards risk assessment that we talked about, and make sure that all OSHA required plans are addressed. You need to develop a focus management plan demonstrating how to manage each type of focus material. We talked about that a little bit earlier today. And then ensure your downstream vendors manage focus materials properly and have it documented.
Going back to that documentation, let's say you have certain boards that you're brokering to a report company that's already certified. They could tell you they're going to sell to home refining the ball mill, but in actuality they stick in an overseas container. How do we police them? I mean, how do we know that what they say they're doing is what they're actually doing?
That's a great question. A couple different ways to do that. One, you can go on site to do an audit of them, which I would then take a look at all the different bill ladings that have invoices attached to it and the shipping records attached to it. And if they can't produce those bill ladings with the invoices and the shipping, if they say that they're sending it to one refiner and you don't see any bill ladings, that's a red flag. That's a huge red flag. You can also utilize a company to do a downstream audit for you, so that they'll provide you a downstream audit report that you can take a look at, and then that auditor is then confirming all the different bill ladings all the way through the chain.
But anyone can type up a fake bill lading.
So
Well,
I'm going to step in from working in the field where I do have to ship downstream, and I'm sure Corey and Paula and everybody can talk to this, is, it's not just about picking a downstream and doing that audit, because an audit's just a snapshot in time. It's all about relationships and transparency. And so you've got to get to know those people, you've got to be able to trust them, and you've got to have open communication. And with that, you get that additional reassurance. And realize that there are always contracts and things you can put in place to give you more reassurance than that.
Yeah, and to the point of the BOL, a lot of times I look for not the outbound BOL, but the receipt, of the destination facility, who received it, that they signed off on it,
and it had to be pretty elaborate, because I'm oftentimes looking 1 year down the road, 2 years down the road, or previous, I should say, making sure that they have a history going backwards, and that'd be a pretty elaborate history if they're going 2 years back of fake BOLs. So I'm not just looking for the last month or last week. I'll say I want to see 2 years worth of BOLs. Not to beat a dead horse, but once again, that focus material, you gotta, and this is a stumbling block for becoming certified. You truly have to understand the pathway of that focus material all the way until it's no longer a focus material. And quite honestly, oftentimes you need to now educate your downstream and say, we need this, or I can't do business with you. It's very simple, that concrete. So as Corey was saying, we need to take that circuit board. If it's going to a broker and that broker has it, I need to know that broker is sending it to, I need to know whom that is. And if that broker is then sending it to some sort of a separator, but all they're doing is they're putting through this fancy machinery that separates, you know, ferrous from non-ferrous and all that. Well, I still have a focus material. And then if that guy is then sending it overseas to a smelter, we need to know who that smelter is too. So there's, you know, 1, 2, 3 different lines, tier 3 vendors that you need to know and you need to be able to provide to your auditor. Otherwise, that guy in the glasses is going to say, non-compliance. So you have to do it. Yes?
Quickly run through the 5 focus areas.
5 focus materials, what are they? Circuit boards? Batteries. Mercury-containing devices? CRTs? And PCBs.
Now, which of those 5 can you actually make a buck on?
But well, all of them you can make a buck on.
I mean, I thought that there were a couple of those and then you actually have to pay for it.
So that's
Yeah,
a really good
that's
question for after our break, when we're going to have some industrial people that are actually doing the recycling and the OEMs, and they can tell you more about what they do and how they make their buck. All right?
Good point.
Nice. 5 minutes.
All right, data destruction. We talked about some of the different data destruction stuff. Make sure you have a plan for that. Insurance, you must show that you have insurance limits at the appropriate risk levels and a closure plan. That's going to be something new that you need to develop. Transport, this is something you're going to want to start on early, is your transportation. You must have written documents that the transportation companies have no significant violations. If you're trying to get that all done the week of the audit, it's not going to happen. This is one of those areas that you want to start early on, because transportation companies are notoriously slow at getting your information back. After your RIOS and your R2 management system has been developed, implement the system, do what you say. Make sure that when you're implementing it, and Tracy brought up a great point, when you do those procedures, have it be a team. You're going to have your team and your organization more than likely go ahead with this whole plan and follow these new procedures if they feel that they were part of it. If this is all being done by 2 people from the front office, I can guarantee you the guys on the line doing the actual work are going to go, well, this is stupid. Why are we doing it this way? We know way better than these guys. Get those guys involved, and the implementation piece becomes so much easier. Train your employees, make sure you have a training matrix. Once again, it's not good enough to say, yep, I trained John that line. Prove it. Everything is prove it. You got to make sure that you have written date, signature, this is what they were trained on. You want to schedule the certification audit, begin the interview and quote process early, and conduct an internal audit. Here's another stumbling block that I have seen. Someone within your organization says, well, I'll do the internal audit. Well, okay, well, that's great, but hopefully they have a little bit of training on what it takes to become an internal auditor. If they don't, if you don't have anyone within your organization, 2 options. 1, you can get them trained. There's webinars and other training courses you can do to have your staff trained to do its own internal audits. Or 2, you can bring in an outside consultant to help out with that. Conduct a legal compliance evaluation, and then you want to make sure that you're having regular management review meetings so that you're staying on time, much like me. We want to make sure that that timeline is being met, and one of the ways to do that is to have your management review meetings. Any questions on implementation? Yes?
Any thoughts on an efficient training program? Do you roll it out all at once right before you put it into practice, or do you do it at a policy at a time and train your employees on it?
You know, I've seen both, and I think the way I've seen the most success is as you're developing, because once again, it's a 6-month timeline, or 4-month, or however long it is, all the way through that timeline, you're putting new controls and new procedures in place. As those are being put into place is when I would do the training on them to get them going. So that way they're not overwhelmed by, whoa, now we're changing everything.
I've heard a couple of times about a compliance piece on the front end. Does it make sense to involve
I've seen that, yes, I have seen that done. I've seen people work with consultants. I've seen working directly with OSHA or your county or your state EPA, just to make sure.
How do you download the RIO standards? Is that by joining the commission early on?
Right,
Yes.
so start out and you'll go to the ISRI website and then click on Programs and Services, and then you'll see a section for Certify Me R2TMRIOS. You can go ahead and click on that and then sign up there to get more information. So once you become a member and pay a registration fee, which, Corey, correct me if I'm wrong, and Paula, it's $2,000 if you're an ISRI member, right? Per facility for RIOS?
Yeah.
For RIOS. So $2,000 if you're an ISRI member, and then they will send you the implementation guide, the standard, and everything along with it.
One last stumbling block that I just thought of, and this is going down to the downstream due diligence one last time, because you run into it. If you have multiple batteries and you're sending it to the battery guy and they come back and say, I am using this lead acid battery to do the recycling, okay, that's great, but what happened to the lithium ion? So he may be sending that stream out to somebody else. So just make sure you're following all the streams and not just one of them coming back. I think that's it. Thank you.
So just a couple quick reminders before we break here. If those of you have not picked up the survey for today's session, there is some in the back of the room. It's really important that we hear your feedback and your comments so that we can know where to get better and what to do for next year. This is all about you and us doing this to support you. So if you can please make sure you get that and fill it in and leave it in the back of the room today, that'd be great. We're going to go ahead and take a short break, and then we'll come back and hear some industry experience. So it is 3 o'clock now. Let's plan on being back at 3:15. Thank you.
Yeah, let me see those two cards.